Welcome to the Gold Soundz Podcast. We're an indie rock podcast. This is our first episode, and we're going to be talking about Liz.
Phair, yes.
Yep. She is a singer-songwriter, artist from, where's she from? Connecticut?
She was born in Connecticut, but she was raised and started off in Chicago.
Cool.
So, we should probably introduce ourselves. I'm Gabe.
I'm Gary.
And we are two teenagers who love 90s indie, and that's why we're doing this podcast. So,
Yeah.
Liz Phair, to basically sum up, she is, besides Tool, she is my favorite artist of all time. And, as the first episode of this podcast, we kind of agreed that since we're both pretty decently sized fans of her, split between both ways, we decided that it would be fitting to start off with her stuff. So we're going to basically gloss over her 90s material, focus on her 90s material, gloss over her 2000s pop material, like seriously gloss over, because that's not the focus. We're focusing on the indie stuff. This is the indie podcast for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And we will also be discussing her newest single, which recently came out about 2 weeks ago, called Good Side, which is a very decent return to form for her, and probably one of her best songs in nearly 3 decades.
Yeah, it's really...
It's been 26 years since her first album came out, so it's been a while.
It's a good time to be talking about Liz, because with this comeback and with this song, I definitely expect good stuff from her in the next couple... Or in the next year, really.
Yeah, next year. She said spring 2020 or so, she'll have the album out.
Soon. Yeah,
it's crazy. So, to not waste any time, we will be kind of exploring Liz Phair's demo tapes before Exile In Guyville, her indelible debut album, Exile In Guyville, her sophomore album, Whip Smart, a few things here and there between that, singles, one EP, and then her third and final studio album of the 90s, White Chocolate Space Egg, before glossing over her self-titled album, Somebody's Miracle, and Fun Style, the 3 albums that she made in the 21st century so far.
Mm-hmm.
So, to not waste any time, let's discuss Girly-Sound. These are 3 cassettes recorded by Liz in 1991. No definitive time span. We just know it was 1991. She was living at home in her parents' house, and whenever she got the house to herself, she would pull up her tape recorder, pull out her guitar, and take the songs she was writing for about 5 or 6 years at that point and just spill them out. So, these 3 cassettes, so there's Yo Yo Buddy, Yup Yup, Word to Your Mother, which is, totally not aged poorly.
Very nice.
Yeah, totally did not age poorly. Girls, 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 the second, and the third and somewhat elusive cassette, which has been now formally dubbed Sooty. It was previously known as Untitled or just Girly-Sound. They would just call it Girly-Sound. But we have an official name for it finally, called Sooty. These cassettes were formally unreleased for 27 years before finally being packaged with a 25th anniversary reissue of Exile In Guyville called Girly-Sound to Guyville. And they received a very lush remaster job, making the lo-fi quality of these tapes still pretty prevalent, but not
More
as
manageable.
overbearing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, let's just kind of discuss these tapes. Maybe, I doubt, we're trying to kind of keep it short here. If we devote to each one really in depth, we're going to waste a ton of time. So let's just kind of talk about them collectively. I've listened to Girly-Sound a lot more than Gary has, unfortunately. So I think a lot of this I think a lot of this might be just kind of me rambling about it. But you can of course input whatever you have to say about it. One of the things that I was really surprised by when I first heard these cassettes about 2 years ago is that they are incredibly lo-fi. They're not produced whatsoever. They've been recorded at home with really no there's really been no there's been overdubbing, that's about it. That's the only production aspect there really is to this. She takes her electric guitar out, puts the tone up really high, puts the mic up to her amp, and she sings about, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 of the tracks on. It's a 4-track recording for every single track. So maybe 2 tracks for guitar, 2 tracks for vocals, depending on the song. And it's well, in my opinion, because I'm biased and I'm freaking a stan, they are just incredible recordings. I find them just unbelievably brilliant, especially considering they're so amateurish and they're so, as she stated it best, they're juvenile. I don't personally get that vibe. These cassettes are just powerful.
Oh yeah, she definitely feels like a confident songwriter even at this early stage.
Definitely.
With the whole idea of her songs being ultra personal and her emotions coming out of them being fully realized at this point, really.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the lo-fi here, it's an interesting quality of lo-fi because it doesn't, it's not a warm lo-fi, which you sometimes get. Like, I think like B1000 by Guided by Voices is like it's a warm with lo-fi. It's more welcoming lo-fi. I at least I feel, but this is a cold, very lonely lo-fi with the the strumming and the vocals coming through very coldly. If that makes any sense.
I'd say that too. It's very frigid. Like it's not.
Yeah,
it's
not. Right word,
I mean, I guess you can say with B1000 and other iconic lo-fi recordings, they've got this really strange engineering to them. Like you can tell that these aren't raw, I guess. And maybe it's just the production on these tapes, but I really get a very wintry vibe from these tapes.
Oh yeah,
like
for sure.
Very early 1991, like January, February, like there's still snow on the ground. It's chilly outside, and I especially get that from the second tape, Girls, 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 which I could spend hours talking about.
Yeah.
It's just that's my favorite of the tapes. It's just purely stunning, and it's beautiful, and it's depressing, but it's very authentic, which I think Girly-Sound really prides itself on, its authenticity. And I think you can say that a lot about Liz Phair's discography, is that she has never faked it. She's always been real with her fan base, with her lyrics, with everything in her music. It's been authentic, which is really rare, I feel, in artists.
And authentic for better or for worse, as we'll see as time goes on.
Yeah, we'll get there. So, Girly-Sound was initially set to be re-recorded in studio by John Henderson and Brad Wood. John Henderson was the manager for a record label in Chicago known as Feel Good All Over. The only release on that label I've ever listened to is Ashtray Boys' The Honeymoon Suite, which, coincidentally enough, has Liz Phair guesting on 2 songs.
That's a really cool album.
Yeah, fantastic album. I highly implore anyone listening to this to check it out. It's very unknown. I think they have like literally 50 listeners on Spotify. Ashtray Boys.
It's crazy. No one knows.
It's so underground, and I only found out about it because Google started indexing her as a member of Ashtray Boy, and I was like, oh, she's in a band. Oh, let me check this out. And it was very. It's not lo-fi. It's actually well produced, but it's intricate. I like that a lot. It's very the guy who runs Ashtray Boy is very composed. Like he's got a very set vision for his music, and I think that really comes through on Honeymoon Suite. But we're not here to talk about Ashtray Boy. We're here to talk about Liz Phair. So the plans to re-record Girly-Sound fall through, and Henderson leaves the project, leaving just Liz Phair and Brad Wood. They record a couple songs from the Girly-Sound tapes professionally, and they're satisfied with the result. Long story short, Liz Phair calls up Matador Records' iconic indie label. We will go into them a lot on this show.
Yeah.
Second episode, actually, we will discuss another Matador mainstay. We will not tell you who, but maybe inferences can probably be made at some point throughout this episode. She calls up Matador Records, and hilariously enough, the president at the time, or president, I don't know, very higher up person, Gerard Cosloy, who I believe founded Matador Records, was actually reading a review of Girly-Sound in a zine earlier that day. So he decided to call her back on a hunch, give her a $5,000 advance to record a single and an album. That album evolved into her 1993 debut album, Exile In Guyville, which is my favorite album of all time.
Of all time, yeah.
Of all time.
It's
this is a masterwork with every use of the word. Seriously. And I think we can both come to a sort of agreement on that. We both...
It's one of my favorites. I don't love it nearly as much as you, but I think it's great. I think I have it at a 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely stand this album a lot more than Gary does, but we both really respect it a lot. And I think that while Liz Phair has maintained a pretty consistent discography since its release, I don't think she will ever release anything that surpasses the uniqueness and the power of Exile in Guyville. You know, this is one of those albums that arrived in the right place at the right time. And, you know, it was a very tumultuous scene at this time in the indie scene, especially in the Chicago scene that she was in with bands like Urge Overkill, Material Issue, to an extent Smashing Pumpkins. They were involved a little bit in that scene, but they weren't, like, full-on involved because, you know, they made it big. But, you know, she was being told by her friends, oh, you know, a woman can never make it in this scene, you know, you can never get successful, you gotta be a man, blah, blah, this whole thing. And she made this album kind of as an FU to the guys that were telling her, you know, oh, you can't do anything, like you, you can't, you won't get to where we are right now. And she, hilariously enough, surpassed them. She was, you know, touring across the nation, getting on TV, MTV. Critics adored this album. It was album of the year by Village Voice, actually.
Yeah, the phrase Guyville kind of came from a term that would be used to describe that really male-centric scene in the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which,
coined by Urge Overkill, actually, on their EP Stole, another fantastic EP.
Yeah,
they kind of inspired this album a lot, actually, and one of their members, Nash Cato, actually took the iconic photograph of Liz on the cover of Exile in Guyville, where she is topless, pushing out this large jacket and having this exasperated look on her face. It's a very iconic album cover, and one of my favorites of all time, actually. It's just so...
It's an eye catcher.
Yeah, if you wanted to sum this album up in an image, it's that album cover.
And that's all an album cover has to do.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. Every song on this album is... Oh, go ahead.
No, it's kind of remarkable that it's her first album that's considered by mainly I haven't met a person who thinks that Exile in Guyville isn't Liz Phair's best.
Yeah, me too. No, I have run into a few people who think her second album is her best, but we'll get into that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we will discuss that.
Okay.
So, every song in this album, I think we can both agree, is pretty much perfect.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect. I can't speak for you, obviously.
I think all the songs are great. I mean, there are certain songs that shine above the others, but
yeah, of course,
it feels very consistent.
Yes, it's consistent. The flow is amazing. The sequencing in this album is insanely good. Everything flows conceptually, and what's amazing about this album is that it pulls a bit like Pink Floyd's The Wall. The ending of the album cycles into the intro of the album. Coincidentally enough, the last song is named Strange Loop,
and the album itself
is a strange loop. I feel that may be intentional because it feels way too intentional, to be overlooked like that. The album actually starts a bit in a reverse concept, a lot like The Wall. It starts to build the story from an ending and then just kind of flashes back its way through the album. I'm kind of lost for words, actually. Just I could never really sum up my thoughts unless I were to sit here and critique every single song analytically like I did in a video once. I do run a YouTube channel. I'll leave that in the description if anyone's interested. I reviewed this album for the 25th anniversary back in June of 2018, and I looked at every single track pretty much as in-depth as I could.
And there's a lot to look at. It's
insane. Really, it's very layered.
She's an excellent lyricist.
Yeah, excellent.
There's so many.
A lot about Liz Phair's music is that her songs are like mini stories.
Yeah,
and her albums are books.
You want to highlight a few songs, maybe?
Yeah, I want to go over 3 songs, let's do 3 songs, like our 3 most eye-catching.
I might not have 3, but
okay.
Based on what you picked.
Okay, so the 3 that I kind of want to highlight are, I'm going to kind of go for like the deeper cuts here. Explain It to Me, track number 7, was the first song of Liz Phair's that I considered my favorite, and it took a lot of warming up to, and it was actually the reason, besides Adam Jones of Tool, that I picked up playing the guitar, and I just, oh god, the dreamy riff, the production on this track, it's so warm, and it's so cozy, I guess is the word to use, and you can say that about a lot of about most of Exile in Guyville, but I feel like it really shines on Explain It to Me. The guitar is very watery, it's reverbed, but it's not too overbearing, and it doesn't ruin the sound. It's just a perfect mix.
Exile is a dreamy album at points, especially
Yeah.
with the guitar work. She was a Galaxy 500 fan after all.
Yes, yes. Which she actually name drops on Stratford on Guy, which I never really knew about Galaxy 500 until about earlier this year, and I'm a huge fan of theirs. We'll
When I
probably
got you to listen
Yeah,
to
he
that.
did. He got me to listen to On Fire, and I became a huge fan from that point on. We will probably cover them on this show. They are very
Oh
iconic,
yeah.
very important, influential to both of us, really. Explain It to Me is, I don't know. I don't really want to spend too much time going into the concept because that I could spend talk hours for that. But it's just a very stunning and beautiful song, which on an album that is very emotionally mixed. Explain It to Me feels like a really passive yet bittersweet midpoint. It's even though it's not really the middle of the album. It feels like a midpoint for me. More than mesmerizing would be track number 9, which is the actual midpoint of the album. Divorce Song, which is perhaps one of my top 5 songs of all time. The version on here,
Her best.
Huh?
It might be her best.
Oh yeah, I personally think that the Divorce Song is her best song. The Girly-Sound version of this track, we should probably mention, a lot of the songs on Girly-Sound were properly re-recorded for a lot of her studio albums, and Exile in Guyville is chock full of them. Divorce Song is one of the many that was re-recorded, and I feel like it presents a lot better here. The guitar is brighter. It's shimmy, like it's shiny, but it's not. I guess it's not too bright. It's perfect. Again, almost everything on this album has been perfectly mixed, perfectly sequenced, perfectly formatted. It's just, I can't say, I can't not say anything but positive things about this album. Liz Phair's voice has always been a bit of a detractor on her part for most people. I don't personally think so, but a lot of people have kind of critiqued her deadpan, monotone, off-key vocals.
See, that's what's cool about
Exactly.
it.
That's what I think
She
really
doesn't sound
separates
like any other
She's
female
very
vocalist.
smoky and she's very unique. I love that about her voice. It fits her music, I'd say.
Yeah.
I would not, or at least early on, because she does raise her range around White Chocolate Space Egg and sticks with that, but she's actually starting to play a little bit more with her older ranges, which is very interesting. Divorce Song is just probably the conceptual peak of the album before things start to unfold and then hit the climax. So her vocals on this song are amazing. The melody of this song, the rhythm is just it really caught my ear the first time I heard it. Now, this was actually the first song of Liz Phair's that I even listened to, so this was what motivated me to hear the album in the first place. I can't, again, say much else that hasn't already been said about it, and anything that isn't positive is just impossible for me to break out of my mouth. 10 out of 10 song, one of the best songs I've ever listened to.
It's kind of a strange song.
It is.
It shouldn't work melodically a lot of points, but it really just comes together. There's a great episode of Song Exploder, another podcast with an interview with Liz about the recording of this song, which is
Liz Phair and Brad Wood, the album's producer, are both on there, and it's a very interesting episode. I really recommend it for anybody who likes this album, or is a fan of this album in general, or Liz Phair in general. It's a very eye-opening episode to the production process of Exile in Guyville. And the third song that I want to mention, I'm actually going to kind of go for 4 here, if that's all right with you, because they're right after each other. Shatter and Flower. This is
Flower.
Yeah, this is like the 3-pointer here. Just 4 song is track number 12. Shatter's 13. Flower is 14. Now, Shatter, another Girly-Sound re-recording that is massively improved here on the album. There is a droning feedback present throughout the entire track, which really adds an emotional layer. Feedback as emotion. Just ask Yola Tango. They are so many indie bands like to use feedback as an emotional crutch, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I really like the way it's executed most of the time. There are moments where it feels a little bit unnecessary, but in Shatter, it just feels right at home, and it's definitely the most depressing song on the album, without a doubt. Just not even in tone, but in lyrics. It's about, a relationship that's fleeting. The partner of Liz's character is leaving, and she doesn't know if she can reach him in time to let him know how she really feels. And the Girly-Sound version is far more depressing. There's a whole other section of it that's all about, even if I did tell you these things, I bet you wouldn't care. Like, this whole thing. It's really messed up. But Shatter is just one of her masterpieces, and probably my second favorite song of hers. It's beautiful, but it's so sad at the same time, which I really think Liz Phair never really does, and as a result hasn't overplayed the emotional quality of Shatter and the other rare songs that she does do that on. So it's very fresh for her, and I feel like if she were to throw a couple of these songs on her new album, they would feel appropriate. So Flower is a sudden shift in mood and tone. This is probably the song that has propelled Liz Phair to infamy. It is an entire graphic sexual account of what she wishes to do to her male partner in the bedroom. And it is not safe for work, not safe for children, not safe for life if you're a very religious person. You know, this is very, very open, which I guess is what has set Liz Phair as her own unique musician. She's very open. It's not just authenticity, it's also the fact that she's just blunt. Every lyric on this album is blunt. Nothing feels like she's been walking on eggshells. She just says it as it is, and that's she has no BS. That's this whole album, and that's honestly most of her discography. Flower has a very infamous line that she was unfortunately pigeonholed for early in her career, and there was a couple of radio interviews that I've listened to of her discussing these lyrics. But one of the cleaner lyrics in this song is, "Everything you say is so obnoxious, funny, true, and mean. I want to be your blowjob queen."
Okay.
That's the infamous lyric from this song, and also definitely made me freak out a little bit at first when I heard it. I'm like, what? She actually just said that? Oh my god. Oh, I was like 15. Like, spare me, please. It was very new for me. I'd never really heard any music like this before. And yeah, that's all I really got to say about it, is that it's definitely probably one of the most outstanding songs, especially not even for the time period, but for the scene in general. No one was really making songs like that. If they were jokes. Sure. Like, they were joke songs. But no, this
Flower doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, no, Flower is not a joke song. It is very genuine. And she still kind of stands by that. You know, she can appreciate the humor in it. You know, she constantly will, maybe during live performances, she knows how absurd it is. So you can see her in old live videos, you know, crack a bit of a reaction when she says what she says in this song. And that's really all I got to say about Exile In Guyville before I wind up making this podcast 50 minutes too long. So if you want to talk about
I'm going to talk about a couple of the less deep cuts here, I think.
Okay.
So I know this isn't one of your favorites on the album, but it definitely is one of mine. It's fucking Run.
Yeah.
I think it's a great song.
That's probably her most iconic song. Now, I'm not really going to be swearing on this VC. I mean, that's just a personal choice of mine. It's not a thing. It's just, I'm not alone in the house. I don't want to hear people to hear me. It's a moral decision, but it's not a big deal. That is probably considered her objective best song by a lot of people. I don't personally think so. I think it's still amazing, but I don't think it's anywhere near her best. She has a lot of songs that overshadow that one for me.
That's fair. With your favorite
go on.
Artist.
It's your plan. I don't want to interrupt. I feel so bad because I feel like I'm going to steal Gary's thunder, guys. Okay.
Yeah. No, fucking Run is well. First, you hear the song on Exile In Guyville because most people, let's be honest, are going to hear Guyville before they hear Girly-Sound.
Yeah, anything. Guyville's the starting point.
Yeah, just listen to this album if you haven't heard it. By the way, and it's a song about a woman waking up in a dude's arms after having a one-night stand, and she's feeling really bad because she's tired of having all these one-night stands, and she wants to form a more meaningful relationship. And that's kind of the point of the song. And the lyrics, even on the Guyville version, there's this part where she said, "It's fucking run ever since I was 17." And you're like, okay, that's young. And then she repeats the lyric, "It's even when I was 12."
Yeah.
That is again another point in the album where she's being so, the lyric is so hard hitting that
I should say that a lot of the stuff on this album is not reflective of her real life, and she's made that very apparent.
Yeah.
This is a character that she's doing for the album, but it's a she's calling a lot of experiences from people that she knew, but she's not pinning them excuse me, she's not pinning them to any one person or group of people or herself. It's fictional that is inspired by things that she's picked up in her real life.
Yeah. So, and the songs are such little miniature films that, especially the song, I feel, that it's just when it keeps unfolding with lyrics like that. And the really cool thing is, are you going to say something?
I just want to say one more thing about the lyrics. There's a very crushing lyric on this song.
Are you going to talk about the Girly-Sound version?
Well, no, I was going to talk about this one. There's a lyric at the right before the chorus where she goes over the title. It changes from "I can feel it in my bones, I'm going to spend another year alone" to "I can feel it in my bones, I'm going to spend my whole life alone."
Yeah,
that one hit me like a truck on the first listen. I'm like, oh my god.
Speaking of getting hit with a truck, the Girly-Sound version is even more depressing, I think, because the final verse, it flips and it's from the guy's perspective, and you find out that they both think that the other person is just interested in one night stand and wants them to leave, and that's just how it should be. But you find out that from both, the girl and the guy in this relationship, they both, are longing for something more meaningful. And when I heard that, it was like, and she, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, she addresses it as you. It's like in second person.
Yeah,
it's like you want a girlfriend, you want,
Yeah, she's kind of like digging it out of the man's psyche, basically.
Yeah, and that's a hard-hitting verse, especially since it's not included on the album version. When you go back and hear the Girly-Sound version, it's more alone, it's more cold, it's low, and you're just kind of like, oh.
It's a lot sadder.
Yeah, for sure.
Which,
and that's the way a lot of songs change when you hear them on Girly-Sound.
Yeah, they have a new tone to them, which is both haunting and intriguing, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So, is that all we have to say about Exile in Guyville, or do we got more to say?
I want to do one more thing. Okay. I was listening to the album on the train today, and I was the song "Dance of the Seven Veils," and I never caught this lyric before.
Oh, I think
which is the she's it's describing a wedding with a guy, and the line is, "He can probably skip the until death part because Johnny, my love, you're already dead." It just kind of made me chuckle. That's a great lyric.
Oh, and also I should probably mention
that just speaks to the fact that the album has so much re-listenability that you always catch things.
Yeah, there's new things to catch almost every time. There are still things I'm catching 2 years later. It's amazing. One thing I should mention before we do move on is that Liz Phair has had a very recurring character in her discography that's kind of colloquially known as Johnny. No real name for him. It's just Johnny. And this is supposed to be kind of like the overbearing douchebag male figure of her stories, basically. The kind of guy that you don't want to date.
Yeah.
And it's always usually her getting roped or her character getting roped into a relationship with him or something or other. And she explores him a little bit on albums like Somebody's Miracle and White Chocolate Space Egg, but after Exile in Guyville, she kind of drops him off besides those albums. So,
talk about Whip Smart?
Let's talk about Whip Smart. Whip Smart is her second album. It was highly anticipated. She's been a critic's darling now because of Exile in Guyville. The follow-up is highly anticipated. It's now higher budget. Everybody's got their eyes on her. The label is prioritizing her. She's basically a star now. So Whip Smart came in September 1994, about a year and 3 months after Exile in Guyville, and a lot has happened since the release of Exile in Guyville. So she has gotten now in a formal relationship at this point in time with a man known as Jim, we still don't know how to pronounce his last name, Staskowskis. Let's just go with that. Yeah. We're just going to call him Jim, okay? So she is dating Jim now. After meeting him on the set for her video for Stratford on Guy, the song on Exile in Guyville, got a whole music video for it. He edited the video, and they moved in together, had a relationship, this whole thing. And a lot of Whip Smart is based on their relationship at the time. It's a very wholesome album, You can kind of pinpoint the moments. It's a bit non-linear, but you can tell that she's written a few songs about him and for him, and it's very sweet,
Yeah.
It's a flip from Guyville. Yeah, very polar opposite of Exile in Guyville. So, I first heard Whip Smart about a week after I first heard Exile in Guyville, and it was a very strange experience. I didn't really like it at first. I wasn't a fan at all. I was just kind of like, okay, this isn't like Exile in Guyville. It's a lot weaker. But I've since warmed up to Whip Smart maybe being on the same level as Exile in Guyville for me. It's a
really
fantastic album.
Sorry about that.
She continues the conceptual ideas of Exile in Guyville on a much smaller scale. Not just in album length, but also just in severity and depth of the concept. It's, again, pretty non-linear, which Exile in Guyville did have a bit of a linear concept with some disjointed songs here or there. And Whip Smart is the most commercial of the two albums, I would say. Very single-driven. But
especially with Supernova.
Yeah, Supernova, the big single on this album. And
it's a great song.
Yeah, it's a fantastic song. But it's arguably her most famous song besides her 2003 single, Why Can't I? We'll get into that eventually later on tonight. It's really hard to talk about like these albums just because they mean so much to me, and I had a long day at work, and it's it's hard to sum up the thoughts because, you know, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to analyze. And, you know, it's just very, very, it's beautiful. Like, not in the way that Exile in Guyville is beautiful. It's beautiful because you're seeing her be happy in real life and reflecting that into her music, which I think is very necessary.
You have the same kind of lewd sense of humor as she had on Guyville, but it's in a different context. Like there's this great lyric on Supernova where she says, "Your kisses are as wicked as an F-16, and you fuck like a volcano," which is it's that same lewd sense of humor, but it's in a it's coming from a happier place, I think, and that's just really fun.
Yeah,
it's an enjoyable album.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
This contains the same production from Exile in Guyville. Brad Wood and Casey Rice, the duo, kind of worked on the first album together, with the addition of Leroy Bach on bass, who later would join Wilco until 2002, I believe. He was on 2004. He left after 2004, so he's on Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, probably my favorite Wilco album. Great bassist. He worked on Liz's live tour around this time as well, and in the 90s, in 93 for her Exile in Guyville tour, he was on there as well. I don't believe there's actually much bass on Exile in Guyville because it was just Casey, Brad, and Liz, and it was two guitarists and a drummer. It doesn't
feel bass driven at all.
Yeah, no, very much. It's very high end based, which I'm more than okay with. Whip Smart had a bit of a bigger release cycle than Exile in Guyville did because it was more anticipated. She was making appearances on live TV, touring across the nation again, and there's actually a fantastic performance from Good Morning America in 1994 of track 13 on Whip Smart, Alice Springs. It's low quality recording, VHS, not well mastered, and I believe it might actually only be in the left channel, if I recall correctly, but it's a very warm performance. It's very honest, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album as a whole. I mean, I think every song here is a 10. Like, it's in my top 10 albums of all time, and it's probably going to remain that way forever, from the foreseeable future, at least. And, you know, it's when you analyze a lot of these songs, they have a lot of meanings, and similar to Exile in Guyville, it's really hard to pick out every single piece without devoting a ton of time to it. And I've devoted a lot more time to Exile in Guyville than I have Whip Smart, but I've listened to both albums in innumerable amount of times. So, yeah, that's basically all I gotta say. Anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, there are a lot of cool songs in here. One of my favorites is the first track, Chops, which it's a Girly-Sound song. Girly-Sound song, right?
Yes, it is. And it's fun fact, actually, real quick. That recording of Chopsticks is actually the first studio recording that Liz Phair ever did.
Yeah. It's a fun song, or maybe fun isn't the right adjective.
Yeah, maybe not fun.
It's kind of subdued and sweet in a weird way. It's another song talking about a date with a guy, but it's just
one night stand.
I don't know how to describe one night stand. Yeah, but it doesn't. It's not cold and just longing and depressing in the same way that
it's like neutral.
Is. It's neutral. Yeah, it's just kind of describing an average kind of awkward date with a guy.
Yeah,
It feels almost like it has this ambient quality to it, especially with the piano. And
oh my God,
it's a strangely beautiful song, really.
Mm-hmm. I can say that about a lot of Whip Smart's tracks, especially track number 6, Nashville, which has a bit of a shoegaze influence on it as well. Very beautiful. Probably the best showcase of Liz Phair's vocal talents early on. She pushes her voice a lot in this song, and it doesn't falter at all. Probably one of the 5 songs I'd show somebody if I was trying to get them into Liz Phair without an album. Probably either my second or first, like my second or favorite song on the album. It's just stunning. Every song on here is amazing, but that really stands out for me, and it always has.
That's an interesting question. What would be your mixtape to get someone into Liz Phair?
To get someone into Liz Phair, so my mixtape, to pick 5 songs, particularly from the 90s, I would probably open it with 6 Foot One.
Yeah, I would say the same.
Yeah, 6
Foot One. That's the first one I heard.
6 Foot One, Nashville, Strange Loop.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know if I put Strange Loop on there. It feels like more of a once you get into the album.
Once you get into the album, okay, well then maybe not that. Let me think here. It's really hard because I'm so biased against all my favorite songs.
I'd put Never Said on there.
Okay, yeah, Never Said's a good one. So yeah, Never Said. I would put Nashville on there. Did I say Nashville already?
Yeah.
Okay, so so Nashville, 6 Foot One, Nashville, Never Said. I want to do one more from Whip Smart and then one from White Chocolate Space Egg. So one more from Whip Smart. Probably Supernova, honestly. Like, it's a really accessible single. Very popish. Yeah. And number 5, I'd like to pick the closing track from White Chocolate Space Egg. We'll get into that a little bit. Girls Room. It's probably her best closer ever. I'll discuss that more. And it's honestly, if I had to say someone, listen, I know this album's kind of underrated and it's not really liked that much. Listen to this track and think differently, please. So, Whip Smart. Now we kind of break into the real life story of Liz Phair here. So she gets married to Jim in 1995, and by 1997 she's given birth to their son, Nicholas. So this sets the tone for her third album, which came 4 years after Whip Smart. She's taken a very long break. White Chocolate Space Egg, which is a very strange name. But it's been named this because she had a very strange vision, dream kind of thing, where people were complimenting her new album, and it was named that. It was named White Chocolate Space Egg, and she realized when she gave birth to her son, that's what his head looked like.
A white chocolate
space egg. So, yeah, that's where the title for that quirky little album comes from. Now, similar to the first 2 albums, White Chocolate Space Egg is a 10 for me. That took a lot of time to get to. I'm not kidding. I genuinely thought this album was pretty weak for 2 years. It was not until about April of this year that I finally warmed up to this album all the way. It's a very long album. It's actually shorter than Exile In Guyville, but it feels so much longer, I guess, because it's not as focused, which is a bit of an issue, but it's not the biggest problem.
Yeah, the styles meander a little bit. What's the one song that's kind of got the electric thing going on?
The electric what now?
There's a song with an electronic element.
Oh, that's what makes you happy.
Yeah, I remember I was worried about that because when I was listening,
it's very that is probably the poorest, like the song that's probably aged the poorest on this album because it's so 90s.
It's very late 90s.
Yeah,
specifically.
And something I should probably mention about this album is that Brad Wood has kind of taken a back seat on this album. He still is a producer, but she actually garnered the help of REM producer Scott Litt on this album, who produced every single one of REM's albums from 1987 to 1996, I think. I know he produced Monster. I do not know if he produced New Adventures in Hi-Fi. Either way, fantastic producer. He's done a lot of great work with REM, and I think he helps keep Liz on track on this album as well. There's actually one of the songs on here, one of my favorites. I don't know how Gary feels about it. Baby Got Going, which is one of her more humorous songs, which she's always had those. She's always had humorous songs on every album. You know, it's her least serious. It's about a woman getting a sexual rise out of a train ride from the bumpiness, if you know what I'm trying to say here. And it starts off with this really, it's a bit poorly aged. It's very like sort of chiptune-y in the melody's a bit chiptune-y. It's weird. But it's got a whole harmonica section. It's very acoustically based, I guess. It's a very fun song, which I guess is why I like it so much, is that, you know, even when her songs are still kind of weak, at least they're fun, you know?
They're interesting.
Exactly. Some of the more interesting songs on this album are the title track, which opens the album. My God. When I first heard this track, I was blown away. It is one of her best songs, undoubtedly. Very space rock influenced, which is weird for her. She's never really explored any territory like that. It's very... Honestly, some of the backing guitars feel a little bit more in place in Spiritualize than they do in a Liz Phair album. But it's such a stunning track, and her voice on this song is just stellar. It's beautiful. She continues to, really improve on her vocals and her guitar playing in general. She was never a very advanced guitarist. She was very chord driven, but she had a very particular style, and still kind of has a very particular style, where she kind of hooks herself around the guitar neck, and she doesn't really go up and down. She hooks down and up again. She goes up and down, of course, but I always notice that she kind of expands down, or expands across, rather than going down or up. And she can just she hooks her hand around the frets, but she doesn't really move that much.
Did you say she uses alternate tuning?
She does, yeah. At least early on, she used alternate tunings. Girly-Sound, a lot of that is actually played in open E, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So cool. I've mostly capoed when I'm playing Girly-Sound tracks, but a lot of Girly-Sound tracks have actually been remade here on White Chocolate Space Egg. I shouldn't say a lot. Quite a few have. Or, no? Only 2 have been remade. Oopsie. Only 2 have been remade. Polyester Bride is the first of these, and it's a bit... It's a lot weaker than the Girly-Sound version, I will say that. I
definitely agree with
it's
that.
very poppy on this album, and the Girly-Sound version is introspective. It's depressing. It is fleshed out. This feels like a cop-out for a single. And while that's not, the worst thing in the world, it's still a good song, but it's not my ideal version. If I were to have her just re-record the Girly-Sound version and put that on there instead, that would fit a lot better for me. Now, I will say this, I guess, I don't want to speak for you, but I've listened to these albums a lot more than Gary has. So, I don't, if you have anything to say, you're free to go on. I'm kind of just rambling at this point.
It's not an album that I've returned to as much as the previous 2, but it was the kind of thing where I've only really listened to it in full once, and I remember enjoying it. But it's the kind of thing where I feel like maybe her songwriting on here, it just, I can get a lot more out of Guyville.
Yeah, that's fair. White Chocolate Space Egg, oh, go ahead.
You said you wanted to mention the last track, Girls Room, which I do remember, and it's a great track.
Yeah, it's probably the best on the album, I'm not gonna lie. Besides the title track, it's my favorite. Undoubtedly. It's just Liz and her guitar. There's nothing else. It's a return to form for her. It's just her guitar, just her voice. And it's a very simple song, just kind of her going through her friends that are girls and talking about their current goings on or their current ongoing lives. One of them, I think, hold on, what are the lyrics? I'm totally, my mind is spacing out right now. I'm just so tired, but I'm pulling through for this because I want to. So she kind of just discusses her life with her friends and their lives a little bit as well. It's a very usual song for her, but it feels so unique. Maybe because the album has been lacking from songs like this, and it just feels like a breath of fresh air for her. And to have that conclude her indie era feels a bit fitting.
It feels fitting.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It feels very fitting. And it's very sad. If this had been her last song, let's say that she hadn't made the pop music that she went on to make, it would really add a bit of it would cast over a bit of a dark shadow for me, because it's a very melancholic sounding song, even though the lyrics aren't that melancholic. It's just the composition is very very sad.
It's one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things for her that I think is really interesting, that is really unique to her songwriting, which is almost a voyeuristic quality, where it's just songs or these little movies that play out, just observing people in their everyday lives, whether they're having sex or they're just kind of living.
But like a Bob Dylan kind of thing.
Yeah, and less psychedelic.
Yeah, less psychedelic and less. I guess you could also say a little less excuse me, a little less well, Bob Dylan kind of went a little psychological with some of his songs, right?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I mean, some Dylan stuff, yeah,
Yeah,
but
some, not all, but like some, and that's
yeah.
kind of where I'm pulling that from. Liz Phair is a very psychological writer, and I think that's part of why she's so fascinating. Is that she's always written very intelligently, even on her pop albums, which now that White Chocolate's Basic has concluded, we will now gloss over her 2000s work. So in 2001, she divorced Jim. I'm still reading. Her memoir just came out a little bit ago, about 2 weeks ago. I got it in the mail on the first day. Signed copy, by the way. It's a very interesting read so far, and I'm excited to see the follow-up. It's called Horror Stories. So far, it's a fantastic novel, or fantastic memoir. Very dark stuff in this book. It's, as it implies, it's all of the ugly sides of her life story so far, and then the follow-up fairy tales will kind of go into the more glamorous and exciting moments of being a musician and her life in general. So I haven't gotten to the point yet where she kind of delves into that relationship, because I know it's touched on a little bit, but she divorced Jim, kept custody of Nick as far as I know, or maybe she, I have no idea. I'm not her. I don't share her personal I don't know her personal life. I just know that, you know, she makes a lot of references to, or a couple references to him on her self-titled album, and that's kind of what makes me think that. So, her self-titled album, Liz Phair, June 24th, 2003, 2 days away from 10 years to Exile in Guyville, June 22nd, 1993. This is one of the few albums from Pitchfork to receive a 0.0 out of 10.
And Liz is one of the few artists to have subsequently received a 0 and a 10.
A 0 and a 10.
For the Girly-Sound Guyville box set reissue.
Mm-hmm. And the writer of that review has recently come back and said, okay, I don't really stand by that 0 anymore. I was being a bit of a crybaby. So
yeah. Hot
her
White
self-titled. Okay, yeah. Let's just jump right into this. So her self-titled album is a bit of a huge stray away from what she's used to. It's a bit of a shocking stray away from what she's used to, because, she's trying to play up the fact that she's, excuse my language, she's trying to play up the fact that she's a MILF. And it feels this is where she starts to feel very fake in her music. And it's obviously being done for an image. She doesn't seem to regret, like, she's described as not really regretting these experiences, but I know I would. This is a very bad look on a career that has pretty much been built on not being coerced into an image and living your own style. Very hypocritical, in my opinion.
Yeah, it just feels like she's trying, like, the lewd sense of humor, the sensibility, it just feels like she's trying to do that here.
The lewd sense of humor,
based on what I've heard. I haven't heard the full album. I've heard a couple songs.
The lewd sense of humor on this album has gone from a couple of crass songs here and there that, pin her as an innocent woman, like an innocent girl who's making, dirty songs, into a woman who obviously has been, through the ringer once or twice and is now talking about having sex with men twice as young as her while playing Xbox. That is an actual lyric on the album, by the way. Hold on. Yeah, I gotta find it. I think I know what song it is. Let me find it. Yeah, it's this is my least favorite lyric on the album. So let me just read this stanza. Okay. These two lines here. I want to play Xbox on your floor. Say hi to your roommate who's next door. You don't have a dime, but I don't mind. Who gives a damn? Now this is the big one. Your record collection don't exist. You don't even know who Liz Phair is.
Oh no. That's like the worst self-aware lyric I've ever heard.
Oh my god. And the first two lyrics of this song, Rock Me, are so tasteless. Yeah. Oh baby, you're young, but that's okay. What's give or take 9 years anyway?
Ooh, okay. We can forget this exists.
Now, I will say this much. This album is nowhere near a 10 for me. I'd say it's probably about a 7 or so. It's an enjoyable album, but it's not to be taken seriously. And that's the problem with her discography, is that she's prided herself on being taken seriously. And now she's made albums where she talks about using, in one of the songs on this album here, she talks about using semen as a skincare routine.
Yeah, HWC is the song.
HWC. Fill in the blanks for that, or you can just tell them.
Hot White Cum.
Yeah.
That is the chorus. That is a repeated line
Yeah.
of the song. You get to hear her sing.
Yeah.
If you see, if you saw the woman on the cover of Guyville and you want to hear her say the words "hot white come," then that exists. That's a song.
It's so wrong. Now, there's a song on this album that I've always been a little bit bothered by. A lot of fans have seen this as a very sweet song, and to me, it feels a little, I don't know. It's obviously being done with a good intention in mind, but I feel like the execution is really irksome, at least to me. Little Digger is the 6th or 7th song on this album, and it's written about her son seeing her with a man in bed that's not his dad.
Oh.
Which, I mean, is likely a reality, like an authentic song for her, which I honestly have to give her props for kind of writing that into her album and being okay with that. Because, she was divorced and she did have a bit of a history of, having a couple dates in the 2000s, but she never really settled down beyond that. And, it's a very important song, to her discography, but it feels, I don't know, to me it just feels a little bit out of place. And it feels, on an album where you're surrounded by songs like Rock Me and HWC and all of that, it feels like you're kind of phoning it in. It feels weird to me. It makes me a little uncomfortable. Yeah. The song itself is not bad. I feel like its placement is really uncomfortable, especially since it follows Rock Me on the album.
Little Digger?
Yeah, Little Digger follows Rock Me, which is the song.
There's one song between.
Oh, there is? Okay. Genius does not have that listed. What the heck, guys? Oh, it's put afterwards. Never mind.
Okay. I'm on RYM.
Yeah, I'm looking at it too. That's the correct track listing. I should have known. So, yeah. It's a decent album. Nothing special, really. Bit overhated. And
I don't like the whole 0 out of 10 from Pitchfork is just hipsters getting whatever's in a whatever. I don't think it's good, but I don't think it's
he's not really a fan of the whole the whole pop side of her, which I understand. So she follows that up in 2005 with Somebody's Miracle, which is in my opinion a more concise album. Bit of a return to form for her. It's not totally indie. In fact, it's mostly pop. But I feel like she's finally pulling herself back out of that really low point. I gave Somebody's Miracle an 8 out of 10 on Rate Your Music. 4 out of 5. And I think it's probably her best album outside of the 90s. Or her best work out of the 90s, because there's other stuff. There's EPs and stuff like that. So I think that's a good album. Leap of Innocence, the opening track, is, I think, one of her best songs. Like, probably maybe top 30? I don't know. It's up there for me. It's a very great song. Somebody's Miracle, the title track, it's popish, of course. It's very basic. It's about her kind of lamenting how she'll see couples on the street and this whole thing. It's very... It reminds me of her early side, except it's not being done in the same format. It's not indie-based. It's not unique. It's very lush. It's very popish. It's it... it feels a bit hammy, but I love that song still. It's very... It's an intriguing song for me, personally. There are other songs on this album that I think were singles. I think Everything to Me was a single, or Everything, but one of these was a single. Yeah, Everything to Me was a single. Okay, that's probably one of my favorite besides Leap of Innocence on the album. Again, it's very popish. There's male backing vocals, which she hasn't really done since Exile In Guyville. Brad Wood and Casey. I think Brad Wood did. I don't know if Casey Rice provided any backing vocals. And it feels like a mid-2000s pop song, which does show its age. The album did come out in 2005, and it feels like an album from 2005. The great thing about Liz Phair's early music is that it's very timeless. But in the 2000s, because of the production choices she made, their age is already showing only about a decade and a half later. Which is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate, because these albums do have a lot of potential, in my opinion. They're just not executed in the best possible way. Do you have anything to say about Somebody's Miracle?
I don't know if the whole aging badly thing is really an excuse, because I think that her 90s work is very 90s, but it's definitely, aged well. I think,
Yeah.
Guyville is still as good a record as it was in 93 as it is now.
Yeah, I mean,
I just
yeah.
think that I haven't heard these full albums. I've heard a couple songs, but what I've heard from Somebody's Miracle was honestly just kind of boring.
Okay, I mean, I can understand that.
Anything for me. Yeah, and I'm looking at the page now. It's an hour long.
I never noticed that, actually.
That feels awfully long for a mid-2000s pop album.
Mid-2000s pop album, yeah, that's not usually that long. Because, I mean, almost all these songs, there's a ton of songs that are 4.5 to 5 minutes long. It's kind of crazy.
It is strange. I will say it's better than her next album.
So, she has now eschewed the whole Avril Lavigne-esque production that she experimented with on these 2 albums, and decided to make her own album at home using her Mac Fun Style. This is her most recent album to date, because she will have one coming out in 2020, but this is her most recent album, and it seems to be very inspired by someone like Frank Zappa, except if Frank Zappa was solely relying on the weird factor, and for the sake of experimentation, to just be weird. There is not a single good song on this album for me, like, not one. This whole album is just awful. It's formerly my least favorite album of all time, which is hilarious because she's also the only artist from me to have received a 10 and a close to a 0.
You are a pitchfork.
It's amazing, isn't it? Really? I'm a pitchfork. That's bad. Now I need to go euthanize myself. Anyway.
Yeah, you do.
So, it's really sad to see this album getting a lot more respect than her pop albums because this album is just so cringeworthy. And I'm not saying that to be, edgy. It's very cringeworthy. Do you guys ever want to hear Liz Phair rap over an Indian-style beat?
Then listen to Bollywood.
Listen to Bollywood, the second track on Fun Style.
It is awful.
Awful does not even begin to describe this album. She plays a lot of character roles in this album. In fact, there's one song I remember where she portrays a soccer mom with some kind of, like, guru kind of let me look up this song because I want to read these lyrics too. A lot of this is spoken word BS. Like it's not even interesting at all. What is it? Is it this one? I think it might be this one. Oh God,
This album is like you describe Zappa to an 11-year-old with GarageBand.
Exactly.
11-year-old girl with GarageBand.
Okay, so one of the lyrics on one of the songs on this album, "Beat Is Up" is the name of the song, by the way. Let me just read these lyrics. They don't even make sense to me because they just feel so all over the place. My husband doesn't let me buy those tabloid magazines because he says that it makes me fight with him more. Pills that you mix with wine, that your husband and you aren't having sex anymore, that you got married for the money. It's been positively proved, is that even correct grammar? That most top 40 hits have a BPM of 120 or more.
What?
That's an actual lyric on this album.
Non-sex. And it should be proven, by the way.
And she actually spells out LOL on this song.
Oh, no.
Now, the most amazing album, or the most amazing lyric on this album is in the final track, You Hate It.
I do indeed.
This verse, or whatever, this bar, I guess, of lyricism is just... It's truly on par with some of her best work ever. Uh-oh, you don't agree on it. Uh-oh, I totally love it. Uh-oh, I think I'm a genius. Uh-oh, you're being a penis. Colada, that is.
Uh-oh, stinky.
That is my thoughts on that album right there. This is just... there's no question about it. This is her worst album to date, and I doubt that she will ever make an album as bad as this album, ever again. There is absolutely no way she could go lower than how she did on Fun Style. And what's really sad is, and I mean, she is the creator after all, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but she thinks this is one of her best works ever.
Fun Style?
Fun Style. And this album was not supposed to be released. This album cost her a contract with ATO Records, Dave Matthews' record label. She was signed in 2008 for a reissue of Exile In Guyville and was set to release a studio album on there, but when they caught wind of Fun Style, they fired her from the label.
Wait, Fun Style came out on Dave Matthews' label?
It was going to. But then they heard it, and they took it. They said, no, you're releasing... No, we're not doing this. So then she released it by herself on her website for free over July 4th weekend in 2010 and made a CD release in October of that year. Now, the kicker about Fun Style is that I feel like she knew that there was absolutely no commercial potential. That's a Frank Zappa joke, by the way. no commercial potential for this album that she decided to package a second disc full of Girly-Sound tracks that were not remastered, not altered, and merely taken from internet rips of the tapes that have dated back to 2005.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to just know how bad Fun Style is, it was rejected by Dave Matthews' label. It's just, yeah. Come on.
This album cost her a recording contract. Now, let's fast forward. It's been 9 years. Almost 10. It's been 9 years since Fun Style. A lot has happened in Liz Phair's discography. In fact, a lot of nothing has happened because she was planning on making an album with Ryan Adams. But things happened with Ryan Adams, and I'm sure a lot of us know what happened with Ryan Adams, so we'll just skip over that. That album was shelved and was never brought out again. And back in April of this year, she re-collaborated with Brad Wood. And now, 9 years after Fun Style, she has announced it's not announced formally. She has alluded and outright stated that there will be an album coming out in 2020, and the newest single that she has released, Good Side, will be featured on this album. This single is quite possibly the best song she's made since Whip Smart. That's hopefully not my bias speaking.
It's a good song.
It is
really
a great song.
It's really catchy. I've had it stuck in my head a lot since it came out.
I listened to it 60 times. Do you think it's not in my head? My Last FM got tainted by that song for a little bit. When Liz Phair starts incorporating a horn section into her bridges, that's not normal for her. That's like really amazing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really cool. She's
freaking insane. She's never done that before. This is like American football style right now. It's fresh for her, and I love it. It's so good. It's her best song since the 90s, undoubtedly. It takes a bit of the pop that she's been working with, but it's more indie pop than it is pop rock, like the Avril Lavigne-esque stuff she was making in 2003, 2005. It's indie pop. You know, that's what it is.
Yeah, it almost feels like a later period Belle and Sebastian song or something.
I haven't listened to anything past 1998, so I can't say that.
The stuff on Life Pursuit sounds a lot like.
Well, if that's anything to go by, I need to listen to that album. That song is just, in my opinion, fantastic. One of the best things she's ever made in recent memory, like this century. I would say this decade, but it's undoubtedly the best thing she's made this decade. Yeah, this millennium. There we go. This millennium is the best thing she's made this millennium. And there's not much else I can really say about it. So we've explored Liz Phair's discography, and
So what do you think? What do you think the future holds?
For what?
For Liz Phair.
For Liz Phair. I think she can have a major comeback with this album because she already got raised public interest again with the Guyville reissue. She did a whole tour. She's got a book out now. Every publication is finally fixating on her again. She's got a lot of interviews coming out, a lot of podcast appearances coming out. Like Controversial Sound.
She was on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, she was back last year for the reissues that she was on Joe Rogan.
It was last year, okay.
Yeah, last year, 2018. It was for the Girly-Sound Guyville thing.
Right.
So, I really think that she can kind of have a bit of a career revival here, which is much deserved for her, in my opinion. 'Cause, you know, she has not had the most success since the early 2000s. After the 90s, a lot of people really forgot about Liz Phair, which is unfortunate because she has some of the best music I've ever heard in indie. That's not even a bias. I try not to make it a bias. I've heard a lot of indie artists. I've heard a lot of underground indie artists. I've heard a lot of normalized, more famous indie artists, and not many of them can really compare to Liz Phair for me.
Yeah.
She is her own force.
Yeah. She's always had something to say, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Whether we want to hear it or not.
Yeah. HWC.
Fun Style.
Yeah, Fun Style. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
She's pretty great, I have to say. I mean, yeah. I think that Guyville is one of the strongest indie albums of the 90s. I mean, there are, of course, for me personally, albums that overshadow it.
We will talk about one of them next time.
Yeah, actually, you want to just say we're talking about Pavement next time?
Yeah, we're doing Pavement next episode, okay?
That's the name of the podcast.
Gold Soundz, we got it from Pavement, so we're doing Pavement, okay?
Matador Records, 1994, come on, we got to go for it.
I mean, we talked about Liz Phair. We got to talk about the other mainstay now. We got to talk about Pavement.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you have to say about Liz Phair? What do you think she can do now?
I think you're right. I think if she can produce an album that's as strong as Good, with that sensibility, I think it's Good Side is a very mature song.
Yeah,
which is really cool because Fun Style is really immature, and I mean I'll say that's not a mature album at all. And I think that she's in a place where she's introspecting a lot because obviously she's releasing these books and she's talking about her career a lot, and I think she can really has the potential to come out with a really kind of strong album next year. Yeah, just
I agree.
One that's, she's never going to make another Exile in Guyville, but she could make a really solid, kind of subdued singer-songwriter album. And I'd be happy with that.
I'd be happy with it too. And even with Brad Wood on the team again, with I found this out, with guitar parts contributed by Casey Rice. The trio is back. The trio is back. I think even with them, that she could make something that, blows the rest of her discography out the water, but Exile in Guyville will always stand on top.
It's always going to be Exile.
It will always stand on top. It will always be her definitive statement and her finest hour. Even if it was her first album, she still made a ton of great stuff after that. It's at least in my opinion, a lot of people, at least back in the day, did not really agree on that. A lot of people are finally coming around to Whip Smart and White Chocolate Space Egg, thankfully. She will never be able to touch that album again, which is unfortunate because when you hit it at your biggest with your first album, early. Yeah, when you exceed when you kind of defy your own expectations to their highest amount on your first album, there's not really much else you can do unless you've got a very, very innovative discography ahead of you.
Yeah, when in an industry where most artists' careers peak in high school, Liz Phair peaked in kindergarten.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's a great way to say it.
Yeah, it's literally the year.
Kindergarten.
And that's honestly a problem that a lot of artists have when your first album is that good and having trouble following. Yeah. And I think the only thing you can do is try and expand and make different work and experiment for better or for worse.
And she's done a lot of that, I'd say. Like a lot of it. And some has worked and some has not worked.
There's a lot of the for worse, but I'm looking forward to there being some of the if this single is anything to go off of.
Yeah, it's
I don't think we're going to get an album of just Good Side and then 4 or Good Side and then 10 fucking unreleased songs from Fun Style, It's going to be
there are sessions files from Fun Style that I've heard are actually so much better than the original album, but she's done pretty much whatever she can, or her management, I guess, has scrubbed them from the internet and I can't find them. So they've been uploaded to YouTube, but they're gone now. I found them on a Steve Hoffman forum post, great forum, by the way, for music discussion. I've noticed it's a music forum. They have a music forum, I guess, and they discuss a lot of stuff. They have a couple threads on Liz Phair. I found them on Google. Interesting stuff. They have one where they kind of go through all of her rarities, and I use that as a base point to kind of collect all of her rare stuff, because I have almost all of it now, I think. I'm just missing like TV stuff. I think I have every unreleased song besides those 2 from Fun Style. But
Liz is a big forum presence in early internet. Wasn't there a website devoted to her feet at some point?
Yeah, back in the 90s, there's a guy who actually still runs a website. It's called Mesmerizing, based on the song from Exile In Guyville. Fantastic.
I didn't realize it was called...
No, not that site. It's a fantastic website, by the way. Probably the best Liz Phair archive on the internet. And he's got a page on there that talks about other websites for Liz Phair. And one of them talks about pictures for her feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's also one that was back in 90-something that was called 5 Reasons Why I Should Marry Liz Phair. This is great stuff. So yeah, that is it, I think.
We're almost at...
We have just...
We're almost at an hour and a half.
We've reached about an hour and 10 minutes, which is good time. We did not want to surpass an hour and a half. I think this is a good time for us.
You want to wrap it up?
I think I'm ready to wrap it up. Right. So thank you guys, everybody, for listening.
Gold Soundz, Liz Phair. We got Pavement next week.
Pavement next week. Yes.
Hell yeah! All right.
Very
see
excited.
You guys later.
We'll see you guys then.